Chapter 41. After they had slipped back to the human world, they walked to a gas station a few blocks away. This was their agreed-upon meet-up location. As they waited hand in hand, Alicia could not help but see the similarity to their journey's start. She had learned so much and changed so much, yet they were still here waiting on Sadar. They were always putting their faith in him. She just hoped that she was not wrong to do so. "Don't worry, Mom. Everything will work out just fine. Sadar will protect us." Alicia wished she could have his blind faith and optimism, but then if she did, they would have already been shipped off to the king. Someone needed to be a realist and plan for the worst. A nondescript silver Suburban pulled up on the street in front of the alley they were hiding in. It was precisely the type of car that Sadar would acquire, but she wanted to be sure. Finally, the window rolled down and Sadar appeared, gesturing for them to hurry and get in the vehicle. They both ran and climbed in. In the back there was a booster seat for Kenny. Alicia glanced up at Sadar quizzically. "Well, we can't have the kid getting hurt, so I made sure to grab one." While they drove, Alicia was still on edge. "Do you think he made the call yet?" "Don't worry. Everything is fine. There is no way they could have caught up to us this quickly." Alicia, sitting in the front passenger seat, looked out the window. They were still in the downtown area. Traffic was heavy, causing them to stop before moving only a short distance. It felt jarring to be by so many people again after the sparseness of the in-between. She looked at her world and saw how dark and dingy it was. Pollution filled the sky, dimming the sun. Instead of random gardens, there was trash floating everywhere. "Maybe the in-between is not the only world that needs saving," she muttered. "It is hard seeing what humans are doing to this planet. Maybe once the throne is secure we can reach out and find ways to help the humans too." Alicia held on to this thought as the anxiety filled her. Maybe they could do good for more than one world. They just had to make it through the next part. The downtown area started to slip away, and Sadar jumped on a road headed out of town. As the buildings started to become suburbs, Alicia looked back at Kenny and saw him reading one of the books that he took from the bookstore. "Are you doing okay, kiddo?" "Yeah, sure," he said, lost in a different world. They drove on until even the houses started to become scattered. Alicia wasn't sure how long had passed, but it looked to be at least noon. "Do you think we should stop soon?" Alicia asked. "There is a spot a few stops ahead. If you're hungry, I would recommend eating something now just in case." Alicia reached in her bag and pulled out a stack of muffins that Retta had packed. She passed them around and watched to make sure her son ate. She kept her own muffin in her hand, her stomach too full of nerves. "Do you trust me?" Sadar asked. Alicia looked at him but did not answer. "I think we've been followed. Everything will be fine. This plan will work. All that matters is that the significant parts happen. The little details can change. You need to be flexible." "I'm not a very flexible person." "I've noticed." They pulled off the freeway. There were a few gas stations and restaurants. Sadar pulled into the parking lot that was biggest. He drove around the gas pumps to the back end of the building, as if trying to be unnoticed. The area they parked in was a small strip of pavement that extended back into gravel. There were a few large trucks parked further back. They sat facing the back door of a restaurant. "Should we go in and order some food?" Sadar turned and looked at Kenny, then faced her. "It's time. Just remember that you trust me." He opened his door, slid out, and shut his door fast. Before Alicia could follow him, the locks clicked into place, trapping them. Alicia's breath caught as panic began to overwhelm her. She undid the lock and attempted to open the door, but it would not move. She frantically went to the driver door, but it wouldn't open either. "This wasn't part of the plan!" she screamed. She pulled on the door handles, willing them to open. "This wasn't part of the plan!" The words came out of her mouth on loop as she pounded on the window. They had talked this part through, how they would be handed over. It didn't involve Sadar locking them in the car. She felt helpless, the plan already spiraling out of control. All the anxiety that she had been holding on to overwhelmed her. "This wasn't part of the plan!" The words were now a desperate plea. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Kenny's voice was scared. Alicia knew she needed to calm down for him. But the thought had barely registered before their car was surrounded by a horde of black SUVs. Alicia started crawling over the front seat to reach Kenny when the car door opened. A burly elf saw her, said, "Oh, no you don't," and then grabbed her, pinning her arms at her side as he pulled her out. She kicked and screamed. but none of it seemed to bother him. The elf placed her in the back of one of the SUVs, her head barely missing the roof. As they closed the door, she saw them taking her son out of the vehicle. He looked at her with fear, tears streaming down his face, but went with them without a fight. "It'll be okay," she screamed, uncertain if he could hear her. "You're gonna be okay!" There was a group of 4 men gathered around her son's door. They were all muscled with black suits and ties, looking like they learned how to dress from Hollywood movies. Their voices picked up. The words were Elven, but they were unmistakably arguing. Sidar came to them, trying to push some of the men away from the car door. His figure seemed almost small next to the imposing elves in suits. One of the elves pulled one of Sidar's arms behind his back and walked him to the back of another car. Alicia turned to follow them and caught a brief look of fear in Sidar's eyes. She watched Sidar try and struggle with the bigger man. At the same time, he was talking desperately in Elven. A second man opened the door to a third SUV, and between the two of them, managed to get Sidar in the back seat. The man left at her son's car started yelling. Alicia, desperate to divert their attention, started to scream. She half lay back on the SUV's bench seats and lifted up her feet, trying to smash through the window. The screaming stopped as they turned their attention to her. One of the men said something to the group and shut her son's door. Then he walked around to the front of the SUV. Another man joined him right after, and the car took off. A third man walked away, joining the SUV they had taken Sidar to. Alicia stopped kicking as the 2 remaining men started glowering in her direction. They exchanged a few brief sentences, then moved to the front of her SUV.